And we are live. So, hi, Simon.
Hey, Maurice.
Hey,
How are you?
Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Maurice.
This is going to be a very, very important one. It's our 19th webinar already. I did a few with Jerry. Some people call us already Tom and Jerry. Yeah. So, welcome, Simon Doble. Welcome, Arash Aazami. And welcome all the people who are now joining in the chat. Please let us know where you're from. We are happy to hear that, because this webinar, how we solve the energy poverty, is very important to every human being in the world. Jerry.
Absolutely, it is. If this is a bit of a start, that we can start a movement of people to end energy poverty, then this is going to be a brilliant start with these two gentlemen here, as they're already working on it. And if we can jump on to what they're doing, the world's going to be a better place.
Sure. We have Australia, of course, and it's Sydney, some people from Belgium, Amsterdam, of all places. So welcome, everyone. And for sure, more people are joining us in the next couple of minutes, but I really would love to start, because it's so much more.
Oh, just whilst Maurice is off the air there, you'll be pleased to know, Simon, that our good friend Dan is on board with us tonight. So this is a great opportunity for us Aussies to get to know you better, Arash. I know we'll get into Maurice when he comes back to us, but the last time we had a conversation, you were saying that you're very keen to get onto Australian soil.
Absolutely, it's one of the few. Well, it's the continent that I have not yet visited, and I would love to. And as many Dutchies, I don't have a real Dutch name. I'm half Persian and half Dutch, and I grew up in West Africa. But many of the people from the Netherlands have some relatives that moved to either Australia or New Zealand, and as did we. So for me, it would also be reconnecting to the old family.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, there's a very big Dutch community down here. I think Simon would have seen that in his travels. As like here in Australia, we have people from all over, which is wonderful. Again, we're actually off storyline here, but Simon, you did a fair bit of traveling around Australia when you came out from the UK.
Yeah. I went up and down the East Coast quite a few times. It was a lot of fun. As a young backpacker, as most English people that come over at that sort of late teens, early 20s do. It was good fun, and met a few Dutch people along the way as well. So it was nice.
And again, I feel like I'm speaking on Maurice's behalf, but he came out here doing the backpacking in the what is it? Just before 2000. I think it was the 2000s when we had the Sydney Olympics. So it was a good time to be in Australia, and a good time to be a visitor. And he had a ball. And I think one of the things he'd talk about was, like, he would ask people what they thought of him, and he created a bit of a diary of it. So in a nice kind of way, after he'd spent some time with him, And and I think there would be a lot of interesting stories from that. Welcome back, Maurice.
Did he start yet?
Thrilled to have you, Maurice. Thrilled to have you as always.
Thank you.
So glad you found your way back.
That's the way. So sorry, guys. It can happen another time, but let us dive.
The sound is still a bit off, Maurice.
Yeah. But Simon, tell us, where did it all start?
For me, it started. I've told the story a few times now. It started in October 2011 for me. Certainly, my journey into understanding what energy poverty is. I read an article in Time magazine in October 2011 that described energy poverty as the world's worst form of poverty. And at that moment in time, I had actually experienced energy poverty. I traveled and lived in it, but never actually appreciated and comprehended what it was until I read this article and all the statistics and numbers in that stopped me in my tracks, literally, and pushed me into the journey and the path that makes me sat here talking to you now. So, yeah, quite a profound moment for myself.
Nice. Arash, where did it all start for you? Arash?
Bit of technical difficulties there again with Arash. Let's see, Leslie's playing with it. Just so we'll go back a little bit there with Simon. When you did find out about energy poverty and you read that story that sort of stopped you in your tracks, there was a case of you trying to reenact what it must be like to live in those conditions. I'm just thinking about you living out the back. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so I read the article and it really elaborated on the extremities in a huge situation people are exposed to when they do live in energy poverty, and you know, the educational element, the environmental element, but ultimately the health implications of people that live in energy poverty. And I read a lot and studied as much as I could and learned as much as I could about the issue of energy poverty. And ultimately, I started to understand that even in refugee camps, there was an issue, and that was another huge learning curve for me. And I ended up purchasing a humanitarian tent out of Pakistan and brought it back to Australia and lived in it with the aim of trying to understand what it felt like to live in energy poverty in a humanitarian tent, as best I could, mimicking those situations that ended up where we are now. And there's a few ideas and inventions under my belt now, which have been used and are still being used across the world to help end energy poverty ultimately.
Indeed.
Let me tell the people, what is energy poverty? What is it?
There's a spectrum of energy poverty ultimately. There's people that live in extreme energy poverty, like there are people that live in extreme poverty. I mean, there's extremes of everything. And extreme energy poverty is where there is absolutely no supply of even unreliable electricity. So as we experience electricity, we can walk into our energy. We walk into our homes and can turn on a light, and we feel it's an automatic sort of right that we experience that. Well, for hundreds of millions, if depending on what you read, over 1 billion people, they have no supply of energy whatsoever. So essentially, they're still burning firewood in their communities. They're still burning oil inside lanterns inside their homes, which gives off terrible toxic smoke. They're still burning on open flames inside their homes, in generally windowless homes that have no chimneys. So that's my form of energy poverty that I work in. But then there's other energy poverty in the sense that there's communities in Australia that only are powered by diesel generators and have an inconsistent supply of diesel. So you can term that as energy poverty as well. And even people that live in very poor standards of living in inner cities that can't afford to pay their electricity bill because of the situation they're in, the economic situation they're in, that can be perceived as another form of energy poverty. So it affects so many people in different ways. So it's a fairly large spectrum, but ultimately what we work in is the very, very extreme end of energy poverty, where there is literally no form of power whatsoever, which is what we're trying to end.
And that's also the reason why I connected to you and introduced you to Arash. Every human being in this field has a background story why he's into that mission. So Arash, you are back again. Happy to be there. So we experience all of us maybe this kind of problem. Tell me exactly your story, your background story, in short.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a bit of a technical issue. I had to log off and log on again. And actually, that's a very luxurious position for me to be in, because I could choose to log off and log on again and be connected to the internet and be connected to an electricity network and
be connected to all of you guys. And I learned that this is a position of luxury when in 1980, my parents, I was 3 years old at that time, my parents decided they would move to Niger in West Africa to do pioneering work. So they did development work in the medical field.
Because you are born in the Netherlands.
Sorry?
You were born in the Netherlands.
I was born in the Netherlands, and then I was raised in Niger, West Africa. And we weren't we didn't live in the city. We lived in small towns, and the first town that we lived in was 1,000 kilometers away from the capital. And almost everybody there had no access to any modern form of energy whatsoever. After 3 years, we got a television, and we lived there for 8 years. And we had one of the 2 televisions in the town that we lived in, and were 30,000 people there. And we could watch television 3 times per week, because that was how many broadcasts there were on a weekly basis. But we could only watch them if there was electricity at that moment. And we had power cuts every day. It was an everyday reality, even for the rich that were connected to the electricity network and to other forms of energy, to experience power cuts and to have fairly unreliable connections to all these basic needs. And it was only years and years later, in 2006, when after working in online tech for quite a while, I dived into the energy sector. And it was there that I was actually stunned. I worked for an energy company in the Netherlands, and I was stunned by the ease with which my colleagues, energy professionals, were talking about their product. On the one hand, not really understanding what it is, but also not understanding how important it is. You know, to them, it's just a product that you buy and you sell, and your client switches on a machine or a light, and then it works. And we just take for granted that it's here. And in the meantime, there's 1.3, 1.4 billion people in the world that have no access whatsoever. 86% of all the people in Niger, for example, and 2.9 billion people that live in what we call energy poverty, that have to rely, just as Simon just stated, rely on collecting biomass, collecting wood, so that they can cook. Now, what is this? Why is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing for many, many reasons. But for me, a very important aspect of energy poverty is simply a lack of opportunity, a lack of time. Why? Because if you live in energy poverty, you still have to fulfill your basic needs. You have to eat, for example, you have to survive, and collecting the wood, for example, to fulfill your basic needs oftentimes takes up to 50% of the waking hours of mainly women in underdeveloped countries. And that means that these people, spending half of their waking hours to fulfill their basic energy needs, to support themselves and their families, they cannot spend that time on attaining an education, or on earning an income, or on spending quality time with their loved ones, which means that you are completely deprived of getting out of that poverty. You just simply don't have the time to get out of poverty. And so as long as people have no access to modern forms of energy, education is going to be a no-go. Earning a proper income, or going forward in life, or supporting yourself, or enabling progress of yourselves and your families is just not going to be possible. So in order to alleviate the biggest problems in the world, food, healthcare, access to clean water, education, roofs over our heads, we need to start with enabling access to modern forms of energy first.
Oh, exactly. And it's amazing that after I've introduced Simon to Maurice, he introduced him to you straight away. And I can see why, just even on what you were saying then, you know, it is that lack of opportunity and all that time that is taken up just to collect wood. It has such a ripple effect that goes all like way down to the education and to be able to move forward. Like, it reminds me of even something when I first met Simon and we chatted, that even when I go to flick the light switch on now, just something we took for granted forever. Which made me think, even going back to with talking to Simon about when he put himself in that tent, there was just so many ideas that come from it. And I'm just thinking, he put himself under those circumstances. But Simon, would you like to share the story about how you've gone to the UN with like a rifle case with the invention?
Joke.
You'd think I'm joking, but this is actually a true story, and it all relates, Arash. It all relates here.
Yeah, sure. So, firstly, I think the big word out of that last conversation is granted. We take energy for granted. We run school programs in SolarBuddy, which we'll obviously go into a little bit later, but very, very often, almost every time we run these programs, we ask the children, what would you miss if you didn't have electricity? And out of, probably 200,000 children that we've engaged with this particular program, we count on one hand the amount of children that have said light or cooking or the fundamentals, the basics of life. It's I wouldn't be able to charge my phone. I wouldn't be able to charge my computer. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the point that we all take energy for granted is why we do what we do. And we need to raise awareness that is a fundamental right for 1.3, 1.4 billion people on the planet, which is in 2020 completely unacceptable.
People must understand it's not just in Asia, Africa, India. It's all over the world.
Yeah, all over the world.
Yeah.
Well, if I sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
No, sorry. Just like you were saying, it's like the power cuts all the time. It's like you had 30 broadcasts, and it was only if you had electricity at the time. I'm just going to go back again to the tent, where I love the simplicity of this. is to create the light in the tent. When we talk about like the people who are living in the villages and going off to get wood to burn it, it was that when you had decided to put a light in the cavity of the tent, so when it goes up, it gives light. There's just such a difference. You want to just explain a little bit about that, please, Simon?
Sure. So as discussed earlier, I had this humanitarian tent. And I was trying to ideate, solve, innovate a way of actually integrating lighting into the tent, lighting and power, running off renewable energy, but actually integrate it into the fabric and the structure of the tent. And I ultimately struck on the fact that these tents, all tents, are held up by tent poles generally, and the tent poles are hollow. Which in the same context as a building, it's like the cavity between your walls. Certainly in Holland and in Belgium, you have probably large cavities in your walls to keep the cold out and the warm in. And that's where we put our wires for our plugs and sockets and our lights, and plumbing for our water and heating. And for me, that was the same concept as the cavity of a tent pole, which is where we should potentially put lighting and power. And that's ultimately what I did. And laser cut some windows, some eyelets into the tent pole, and then put in a battery and a PCB, a printed circuit board, with some LEDs, and made a prototype, and it worked. And the good part of it is it didn't disrupt the supply chain of the humanitarian tents. It fitted into a long well-established supply chain and process of how they did business. So that was quite fortunate. But going back to the gun case, that was literally, you imagine having a fairly long, strange shaped tent pole with to me a highly valuable innovation that was which was part of it. How do I take that to Geneva? How do I protect it? This is very important to me, and hopefully useful to many people. How do I get it to Geneva safely? And I was walking along the street one day and walked past a gun shop, and saw a rifle case, a sniper rifle case in the window, and it was long in the right shape, and it was a case that was obviously going to protect my invention. then that's what I decided was suitable to approach the the headquarters of UNHCR, holding my intention. It never occurred to me that that would be perceived as a security risk or slightly unusual, but we do these things. So here we are.
There's an Englishman outside with a rifle case, and he wants to come inside.
How did the people react of the UN? Because they saw a person. They had a meeting with them. Did you?
Few odd looks. Took a while to sort of make myself make ourselves noticed in the correct way, not in a fearful way. So, but it was an interesting day. Ultimately, the outcome was exactly what we wanted and what I wanted, and it was a very emotional day ultimately. So it was a good thing. But it was.
Did you have an appointment, or you just walked it?
No.
He had a rifle case. He needs an appointment.
Beautiful. For me, it's always important. Why are we doing this? Why, as human beings, is it so important to do what you feel, what is right? We of course now in this lockdown, still we are opening again, also in Australia, also here in Europe, but most people don't what they feel don't do. So the action part. And we can talk a lot about it. It's a complex issue, and the definition of energy poverty is already very complex. But why, Arash? Why are you going for it? What's your vision?
Well, so as I just mentioned, the most basic form of poverty is energy poverty, and if you live in energy poverty, you're not going to get out of poverty. That's basically it. So. For me, it also this mainly has to do with potential. There's so much potential within humans all over the world that is not being utilized because they cannot, because they basically have to. They're locked in, and which means that their potential to contribute to the progress of mankind is also locked in.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to unleash this potential. So that's one. The thing that I found out, so in these past 14, 15 years that I've been working in energy, was that we humans in our economy and society have turned energy into a commodity, into a product that somebody's buying and selling and putting a margin on. And we think that it's some luxury product that you have to perform all kinds of marketing trickery upon. But it's not. It's a basic need. It's a basic need for every human being, period. Which means that we should decommoditize energy. I believe that energy should be a basic right. It shouldn't be a product that you are buying. And up until a certain level, we should regard energy as a human right. Every human being should have access to light, should have access to either heat or cold, what they need to be some form of comfortable, should have access to the amount of energy that they require for their education or to perform their work. Mm-hmm. And the moment that you get there, you start to find out that actually we do live in energy abundance. There's an amazing amount of energy that we are not utilizing. For example, the sun alone is shining 1,400 times the amount of energy entire humanity needs for free up on the top of our heads, which means that we don't have to turn energy into a sellable commodity. We just have to learn to harvest it. And this is the thing where you can actually apply the metaphor of the fish and the fishing rod. We are living in a world where we are getting a bit of fish. Those who have energy access, we get fish, and we pay for it dearly. But what we can do today with the technologies of today is all have our own fishing rods with which we can harvest the energy, the eternal energy of the sun, of the wind, of what's inside the earth, geothermal energy, etc., etc., etc. So we can actually be connected to an abundance of renewable resources with no need of commodity traders to be in between us, ourselves, and our basic needs. And this is why I really want to stress this, because energy poverty in that sense is not a problem of the poor that live in Africa, and by the way, there is so far less poor living in Africa than 20 years ago already. There's huge progress being made there. But this is a problem of all of us that are used and think that it's normal to pay an energy bill month after month after month after month to large corporates that are making us think that energy is a scarce thing that they only can make. That's
the issue.
I don't want to use the words that I have in my head right now, but we have the right to access the abundance that nature is providing us with.
I believe in it. What are you thinking, Sam?
We often have conversations around flipping the narrative from energy poverty to energy opportunity, and we feel very much aligned in the sense that what off-grid communities are doing across Africa, India, all across the world is actually highlighting to us the opportunity to become off-grid, to harness the power of the sun, to use technology in a modern way and not be chained to the big energy companies. And if we flip that narrative to become, for want for a better word, the continent of Africa being the innovators of off-grid energy, because they are, per capita by far and away the largest consumers of renewable energy, compared to, our sort of Australia or elsewhere. That's an opportunity, and it happened with the telephone. There's more mobile phones being used on a daily basis across Africa than there's ever been landlines in Africa, because there never was ultimately, a large consumption of landlines in Africa. If you start looking at it from that point of view, then it doesn't become a we're helping you or us helping them sort of scenario. It's actually, they can show us, and that's really important. And that's what we need to sort of highlight a little bit more and bring that into the conversation. So we're being empowered as much as everyone else is being empowered.
Yeah. We are talking a lot about, of course, for ages, about our children, our grandchildren. So you focus mainly also on education, light, energy, and education. For you, is it very important, those children?
Absolutely. As we talk about, every child should have the right to safe drinking water and healthy meals and a safe environment to get healthcare and everything else. I fundamentally believe every child should have the right to a safe, toxic-free environment to study in and to turn off a bedside light every night. I have 3 children, and one of the beautiful things about being a father is turning off that light as they go to sleep and experiencing that emotion. And I think every parent should have that and know that their children are sleeping in a safe, toxic-free environment. And the fact that it's not happening infuriates me. So, that's the core of our work is to provide those environments for children to feel safe and want to study longer. And it's the last thing they turn off when they go to sleep, and it's the first thing they turn on when they wake up. And I think that's a really nice thing to do.
And you also write children books with the best title. And you share.
I do, yeah. They're called Oh No Mo, named after you, Morris, of course. Yeah. There's one here. I have one here.
Oh, yeah.
So they're called Oh No Mo. They're a series of children's books around safety issues, so teaching children how to be safe in certain situations. And the Oh No Mo is the main character, just like you. And Mo gets into problems. Gets caught in a wave at the beach, and him and his friends come together and work out what to do and what lessons that they learn out of that to remain safe next time and those sorts of scenarios. So they're quite good. So fundamental to what we do is all about keeping them safe and educated and aware, and becoming citizens of the future, so they can ultimately be in our shoes, doing what they do.
In our first call, we spoke about 2-3 hours, and thank you for that, Jerry, for introducing me to Simon. And my brain was connecting, of course. I introduced you to a couple of people in my network. One was then Arashs, because he experienced the same with his family rounds, and not on his focus on energy. I just want to name it in this webinar, Simon, because when I'm talking about it, I'm a happy father. I see my children every morning and every night. But I think your action, your energy in this is also because you cannot see your own children anymore. Would you like to share it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm in a situation. It is what it is. It's very unfortunate. But ultimately, the opportunity I had to read my children a bedside book and turn off that light, unfortunately, I haven't had that opportunity for a long time, very sadly. So part of our work and part of my purpose and my aim is to enable as many children and as many parents that opportunity that don't currently have that opportunity because of the situation they were born into, and not for any other emotional or marital reason whatsoever, purely because their family live in energy poverty. And so if we can help families as well as children to experience safety and security through a gift of a solar light, which ultimately enables them to study longer, then that's a legacy I'm happy to create out of my particular situation and difficulty. And we're doing that. We're doing that thousands of lights at a time in thousands of children's hands at a time. So it's a good, hopefully it's a good for my children to see when they grow up.
Arash had the same experience. He is seeing his children again. It's great, and I really would love to connect with a person from South Africa, Tumi Fraser. She has a very important question to you both, I guess. How do we access the abundance without government intervenence? Arash, would you start to ask questions?
It's a wonderful question that requires very long answers, and I'm going to try and keep them very short. Of course, oftentimes you see that there's all kinds of interests that are in between our visions and our wishes and the fulfillment of them. And in this case, it's the same. I think that, if you look at it from a distance, it's very easy. You connect abundant resources to individuals or have them do that themselves. That's even better. And then the problem is solved. So why is it not happening? And it's not happening for a number of reasons. Let me say that one thing is taken care of. There are no technological barriers between us and universal access to clean, renewable energy. Technology is actually all set. Interconnecting different technologies, that's a whole line of work that actually I am allowed to work in. What we are building is the first concept for what we call an Internet of Energy. Now, Simon was just mentioning, like in Africa, we are seeing off-grid examples. I regard universal energy access as not being off-grid. You're connected, but you're no longer connected to a central point of production that you're relying on. You're interconnected to one another as no longer consumers, but as prosumers, producing and using at the same time. And the moment that you have that, and you have millions of people that are prosumers, everybody is able and allowed to make a little bit of energy and share it with one another, then suddenly you're going to get what we call this Internet of Energy. And so we're developing protocols for that. We're developing integrated technologies for that, and also the rules for that, because we want to make sure that this is fundamentally democratic, that it's inclusive, and that everybody will have the ease of access to all these resources. So then there's a number of other boundaries that we need to overcome. One of them would be not technological, but economical, because we are still used to think in terms of business models that are led by scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you, Maurice, would own something that I don't and I want, then you can sell it to me at a price. But what if everybody can have access to abundance of energy? Then suddenly energy has no pricing. You just exchange it with one another. And we need to think of new business models, new models of working together where this energy is no longer priced per unit. So that's one thing that we are working on. Another boundary is institutional, because Tumi's question was about the institutions, about government interference. Well, governments, but also the other institutions like banks, like the financial system, still very much rely on scarcity and on power distribution that is uneven. And what I believe in is that once you get to universal access, literally you're saying power to the people, and which means that we have to reframe what a government is in that sense, and what energy laws would be applicable, and how you're going to be rewarded or paying for whatever you're doing with the entire system and with this interconnecting grid. But more and more we are seeing governments, this is on an international scale, that start to understand that they themselves are also dependent upon all kinds of geopolitical pressure. For example, having to buy oil from conflict regions, or having to buy gas from countries that they do not necessarily have a very good relationship to. And now you're seeing more and more governments that are trying to become more energy independent. And the only way to become more energy independent is to allow your citizens to become more energy independent. So the movement is there, definitely. And it will take decades, but we are moving that way. And I'm 100% sure that we'll get there within the next 1 or 2 generations.
Thank you, Tumi, for this question. Thank you, Arashs, for this answer. It is complex, of course, but can we learn? Of course, you're talking about the Internet of Energy.
Yeah.
What happened when we started with the World Wide Web in the beginning? Huh?
I love the question, Maurice. So I assume that everybody who is watching this webinar is connected to the internet. And that's a very easy assumption, and I think we can check it. And the wonderful thing is, until 1989, nobody was on the internet. www protocol was only written in 1989 by Tim Berners-Lee in Geneva, by the way, Simon. And what did that do? So Tim Berners-Lee's vision at that time was, I'm going to write one protocol that will allow users of all kinds of digital technologies in the world, regardless of what technology they have chosen for, to intercommunicate with one another. So it's basically a translation protocol. Whether you'd have an Apple machine or a Windows-based machine or some Unix form machine or whatever kind of machine, or it be a mobile machine, and that was already a future thing in 1989. We could be able to communicate with one another in real time and understand each other, because there's this translating protocol in between the www. And then there's so many protocols and standards also, like HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or FTP, the File Transfer Protocol, etc. That us billions of people be interconnected to one another in Australia, in South Africa, and in the Netherlands, and in Belgium, and all these other countries talking to one another. And I love this idea. And we are actually about to achieve the same thing with energy. So our Internet of Energy project is actually trying to achieve exactly this, interconnecting energy prosumers producers and consumers at the same time, to inter-exchange energy wherever they get it from. Could be the sun, could be waves, could be the wind, could be anything, and inter-exchange that with one another.
Like you, yeah, like
so we have the WW of energy, and we're actually writing it instead of the HTTP protocol. We're developing what we call the PTTP protocol, which is of course a power transfer protocol, but it stands for PTTP, stands for power to.
Like you, Arash, you of course you cannot do it alone. Like Simon, you cannot do it alone. There's another question, Natalie in the chat, is about what's the role of everybody? What's the role of the government? Because education, future leader, must the government be the leader, Simon, or is it you and me?
No, it's all of us. It's all of us. It's in the hands of all of us. It's decentralized as far as I'm concerned. It's not a government responsibility.
What do you need, for example? What do you need? You are just an individual. You have this massive vision that is much needed. You have a goal. Tell me more about the goal in 2030.
A minimum of 6 million lights to children. A minimum.
And what are the statistics now?
We're a little bit off that. I think we're about 125,000, but a lot of commitments. Plenty to go.
Factories in China.
We have a factory in China, and we're developing a factory in India as well. But
just going back to Natalie's question, Simon, she said, what would you say is the ideal partnership? What does it look like between individuals, corporates, non-for-profits, and societies? What's the ideal partnership?
That's a very expansive question. Ultimately, I feel social enterprise is the perfect path forward. Similar to what was being discussed before. Can you hear me okay?
It's a bit shaky.
Sorry. But for me, the perfect scenario is raising more awareness, having the conversation on an ongoing basis, creating new innovations that connect people, but utilizing the pull and the drive of social enterprise. So it's an economic model, but ultimately has a social outcome which benefits all. I think that is the middle ground where government will still be involved, big business will still have an input. Individuals will have their say, but I think the hub, the focus needs to be driven out of social enterprise. And that's a very broad term, but that's my personal feeling. I think the wonder of innovation around this space in the determination of people that have the longevity to keep pushing through the boundaries and the barriers that we generally face. Do it not because of the financial rewards at all. It's because of what we believe is right and what we know can happen if we all collectively pull together. And that's a social part of the enterprise that I'll probably lean on more. But I think everyone has a part to play. Less so, the governmental part is becoming less and less required, but they still have a part to play. But the drivers, the innovators, the prosumers, the customers essentially are the ones that are going to drive the scale and the impact and the ending of energy poverty, because they're going to demand better. They're going to demand better services. They're going to demand better solutions, and ultimately that's where it's going to come from.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love there, and it's even going back to what Arash said earlier, is like with that lack of opportunity and trying to give it to children so they can be educated and spend more time on being educated. And I love, and he also said how it might take another generation or two, but we will get there. And then it goes back to even with you, Simon, where I love the school programs that you did with the kids making solar lights to give to other kids in need. because they're our future leaders. They're the ones that are coming through. They're going to look back at us and go, why did you charge for energy? You know, this big fella comes up every day and we can harness it. So I love that programs, and I think that's a nice little lead into what do you see for future leaders, Simon?
I'm absolutely so excited about the future and the future of you know, the children coming out and their awareness in connectivity and able to have a voice and state their mark on the world. I'm so excited about that. I'm a big believer in, if we don't get it right with this generation, we are in deep trouble. But I think this generation have the shoulders wide enough in the ability to be heard and have impact. I was on a similar webinar recently with the University of Melbourne, and there was an amazing group of people on there, students, and a similar question came across, and I answered it in exactly the same way. The future is in their hands, but they understand the future is in their hands. They appreciate the future is in their hands. They comprehend that the future is in their hands. Whereas when I was that age, I didn't comprehend that. I didn't realize the necessity to understand that it was in our hands. Whereas these guys do. They comprehend the magnitude of the problem that they need to really apply themselves to overcome. And I think that's really refreshing and really satisfying, because I have a lot of confidence in their abilities ultimately. So.
Because exactly, and I love the program you're working on with the Barefoot Citizen. It all seems to be coming together nicely too.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting. We're sort of creating a wonderful community of people that hopefully come together to solve global issues from a consumer-driven point of view, which is really exciting. We're getting close to bringing that to market, which will scale not just what SolarBuddy does in some of my other initiatives, but bring in large partners as well, to really drive that conversation forward around not just energy, but water, education, shelter, food. The essentials of life, essentially, and that's what Barefoot Citizens is hopefully gonna do, and I'm sure it will do, because we'll work really hard to make it happen. But it's all in the hands of the next generation. They're the guys that are driving this conversation, making us create these sort of entities and these opportunities for them to belong to and to feel empowered by. So it's good.
What can we do now at the moment? Because waiting for the next generation is next generation waiting for the next generation. My belief is I'm a connector. You know that. I love to connect people and see how they grow together. So I think it can start today already. Commit to what is possible. We all, most people don't know what it is. Most people don't know how we can add value, and a lot of people just wait and see what others do. So for me, it's very important even to share this in this webinar on, okay, what is much needed? How can we change the mindset of people now and don't wait for the next generation?
I just jump in there quickly, and I won't, but I get asked a lot, almost every time I do a keynote or whatever, is why didn't I turn the page? Why did I read that article in Time and stop? Why didn't I just keep turning the page and carry on reading the magazine? And ultimately, I think that answers that question. Is we all need to not turn the page quite so often. We all need to be aware of, it doesn't have to be energy poverty, it doesn't have to be anything, but it could be your neighbor, it could be the homeless person that lives in the town square. And we have to be better global citizens. We have to be better citizens. We have to be aware. We have to take action. And it could be so simple as providing a meal to your elderly neighbor that can't leave the house because she's got COVID, because of COVID. It could be anything, but be better. Just be better. And I think that's probably the most important thing, because small steps lead to big leaps. And I think if you can set an example to the people around you, then that's inspiring in itself. And ultimately, that's the direction we've all got to go in, I think. And that's certainly what we do with our organization.
When I met you, I directly said, I commit to your mission. And we'll talk about Arashs the sun is giving us energy, but most people know that when we give to others, that will also receive a lot of energy. And that we must all experience. It's not that first step where you talk about, we don't know what the next step will be, but it will always be better to be good for others.
One of the very important shifts that we are, I think, speeding up right now also is our own awareness as human beings, because for a couple of generations we've been pretty much raised to become consumers and not ask questions, and believe that we are not in a position to ask questions or to have a say in many things, let alone make a difference. And what I believe education is about is.
Can you speak a little bit louder, Arashs? Sorry.
Yeah. So what I believe education is about is to help people realize that they are in the position to make a difference and to make an impact. And once you get that spark of passion also, because then you get in touch with a purpose. You're living for something, and then suddenly your job is no longer a job; it's a mission. And suddenly, you get this spark in your eye when you're talking about that one change you want to make in the world. And I believe that everybody is here for a reason. Every human being is here to make a certain impact in the world. And we can touch upon this. And once we start empowering people to believe in themselves and in their ability to change the world, then the world will change. And there's also one thing that I would love to touch upon, and that is a question asked by Christian. I mentioned earlier that electricity should be a basic right. And then the question is, should it also be accessible for no cost at all? Because this was the case with running water in Hungary during the socialist times, and it resulted in people wasting insane amounts of water. Now, yes, I believe that energy should be freely accessible for every human being, up to a certain level. And that means that, what you could put numbers to it. I know, for example, for a fact that every human being needs the equivalent of 1.3 kilowatt hours per day in the form of food to survive. So that's the energetic equivalent in the food that we are eating, the pieces of bread and vegetables and everything. That's 1.3 kilowatt hours on a daily basis. So you can put a number to that. The second number that we should put on it is the amount of light that we need. And light has become very energy effective in these past few years. Instead of these old light bulbs that we used to have, LED bulbs by now are a factor 60 more efficient, something like that, which makes it again very easy either to get the energy for that for free or make your own. And that's the second part. Whatever you can make on your own without interfering with the environment, make it. Because then suddenly you're no longer talking in energy efficiency anymore, but in effectiveness. How much value can you create with the amount of energy that you can create out of thin air? And then there's another factor to this also, and that is on top of this, I do believe that there will be, and there are markets, and it's very valid to have a market. Because if I want energy that is not available in my neighborhood, because I want to charge my, electric car and drive off to somewhere, and it's not sunny and it's not windy that day, I should be ready to pay for that. So I don't believe in energy being totally free, but like on the internet, you're not paying for the amount of data that you're uploading or downloading, you're paying for the fact that you are connected. And the moment that you're connected, not only can you use data that is coming from somewhere else, but you can send your valuable data somewhere else also. And the same will happen with energy.
We all know that it is possible to solve this problem. It is only a matter of when and of course how. To me, from South Africa, it's really engaging, and can't wait to start in what can we tell people how to start? And maybe we can share, for example, the link to SolarBuddy in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, that's so interesting question to me. Love the passion. What can we do to get involved now? Depends on the context of where you're coming from. We can definitely work with you and the community that surrounds you with some of the work from SolarBuddy and some of the other initiatives that we have. So probably a way forward would be to talk offline and see how we can engage and support you to maintain that passion and help your community and your family. So I'd love to talk further.
Yeah, and I know her very well. She's a very powerful woman. Thank you too.
So, if I may comment on this also, to make it very concrete, I'm looking for locations that we are going to develop in the next 12 to 18 months, where we empower communities to generate energy out of renewable resources, and have this energy be interexchanged by the local users. And not only this, but there's a very interesting dimension coming on top of this also, and that is that because this energy is so abundant from the sun, and the yield of solar panels, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is amazingly good, you actually have a very, very good payback energetically on your solar panels. So a solar panel typically in sub-Saharan Africa will generate about 15 times the amount of energy that it costs to manufacture. So that means that actually you can buy solar panels with the amount of energy that your solar panels are making. So that means that you're going to have this organically growing areal of solar panels to support your local community, which is empowering them more and more to be more productive, to be more effective, and to have access to more and more energy without paying for it in the form of financial payment, but in the form of energy that you are making yourself. And this is what I call the true empowerment. And I call this project Uru Milele, which is Swahili, stands for Free Forever. And I'm actually literally looking for places to deploy the first live pilots with this. So that could be something that we should connect on to.
Yeah, love that.
Very nice, very nice. We have a few more minutes and then the end of this webinar, of course. For me, it's very important, of course, would there be a world where the focus is not money, of course, involved in all the energy problems? Because when we solve this problem, energy poverty, we solve a lot of our other problems. We solve the poverty, we solve the climate change, we solve, you name it, better education for children, Simon. Can we summarize that?
Well, as Arashs said right at the beginning, we can't end poverty without ending energy poverty first. It's as fundamental as that. Can't be more concise than that, to be perfectly honest with you. And the current chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation is the gentleman that said that quote. And I think that literally is the most concise way of articulating what we're trying to do. The knock-on effect of ending energy poverty is profound across all its forms. Children can study in a safer environment. People are spending less money on highly toxic fumes in sources of energy. People are spending less time sourcing the energy in the first place and being more productive. The profound effects of ending energy poverty will result in ending poverty. And I think that's ultimately what we're all trying to communicate here, and what we need to do and what the outcomes will generally be if we can solve this one initial problem, which is being worked on by many people around the world. But collectively, if we can isolate it and manage it, then the opportunities arise for millions and millions and millions of people that is their God-given right to have that opportunity, and that's what they want and that's what they deserve. So let's provide them with that opportunity to be productive, I guess.
Love it.
Arashs?
Well, we're all in this together. if it only starts with all of us believing that we can fulfill our very basic needs with whatever nature can provide us with. And one of the things that we are doing here is also we're starting to develop more and more of these local energy communities that are interconnected to one another, and you're going to connect these communities to one another, and then suddenly you're going to see that there's this amazing, huge network of people that are interexchanging energy from abundant renewable resources with one another. And I really believe that this will lead to a future of empowerment and an economy of empowerment also, rather than with our business models based on scarcity and on a divide of those who have power and those who have not. And you know, years ago, some people started to think already about this entire concept of energy democracy. And I believe that we can actually make the world a far more democratic place if we start to learn to grant ourselves access to these abundant renewable resources. So this is the big theme, and how to make that concrete. Well, we are doing this exactly with for example, the points that Tumi brought up in the chat, and I would love to have a chat to make these things very tangible, very concrete, because we need to have live examples of these situations where people are fulfilling their own needs and becoming more and more independent. And once we have those, they cannot be denied anymore. You cannot deny what you have shown already. You cannot unknow what you know. And we're in the process of getting to know.
I'm thinking we need more people like you, Arash, and you, Simon, to keep leading the way for us so we can follow by example and join in what you're doing.
Thanks. I think we've all got a role to play. You guys are bringing us together and helping us elevate our voice, which is you know, really, really important. And hopefully post-COVID, we can come over and the two of us can work on stage together, which would be really good fun. So.
Sure, we'll do that. Jerry, before I end this webinar, you go to say a few words.
No, I cannot follow these two gentlemen. These two gentlemen get the last word, because it's just a massive thank you for your time, your insights, what you are doing for this planet. On behalf of myself and Frank and the rest of the people I know, we just want to say thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, and so we can support you in every way we can.
It's so right. Thank you, Jerry, for introducing me to Simon's. I'm really happy that I brought you together, Arash and Simon. Thank you for the time in this webinar. It is, for me, one of the webinars with a topic that is most important to talk about with the rest of the world. So this replay will be available for more people. Please forward their mission. It's life starts always with a mission, and in this lockdown, we were more listening to our own feelings. You can start from fear, of course, but don't do it. Don't start from fear. Start to feel and do what you have to do. Every human being is a part of other human beings. So please co-elevate with the words of Keith Ferrazzi. I had him last webinar. And please join us next webinar with Vikas Malkani again. He's more talking about the karma and why things happen in life. And he would love to take you on a journey to get that fear away, because we are all in this together. And that's the beauty of this year. And we more listen to our own feeling, but we are more connected with the whole world and listen to each other. And this is a topic of energy poverty. We must solve that together. So please commit to Simon. Please commit to Arashs, Universal Rights, Simon Doble, SolarBuddy. You are two great human beings. You became my buddies, my friends, and this is just a start, just the beginning.
As Arash says, more power to the people. I like that. Fundamental. That's what we're going to do. More power to the people.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. And we have a brief webinar, so thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.